World War I was supposed to have been a short and glorious war, but by 1916 a new kind of industrialized warfare had seen the death toll soar into the millions with no end in sight. Naval blockades were beginning to cause shortages of food and fuel across Europe, while thousands of women had entered the workforce replacing the men sent to fight in their millions. All sides were preparing for a long war. The war has raged for a year and a half as the Allies continue to battle the Central Powers. Recently joined by Bulgaria at sea, the British maintain their naval blockade of Germany, preventing the import of food and other vital raw materials. Germany has retaliated with a U-boat blockade of Britain, but has to limit its attacks to avoid provoking the neutral USA, whose citizens have already been caught in the crossfire on the Western Front. French, British, and Belgian troops are dug in opposite the Germans, both sides trapped in the bloody stalemate of trench warfare on the Eastern Front. The Russians have ended their long retreat and stabilized the line, but their army has suffered huge losses on the Italian front. Italian troops have launched a series of costly unsuccessful attacks against strong Austro-Hungarian defenses, while on the Balkan front the Central Powers have overrun Serbia, whose army is forced to make a bitter retreat through the Albanian mountains. On the 5th of January, Austro-Hungarian troops attack Montenegro. They are delayed at the Battle of Microvac, but 3 weeks later Montenegro is forced to surrender. On the Caucasus front, the Russians launch a surprise winter offensive against Ottoman Turkish forces. 6 weeks later, Russian troops occupy the city of Arizona. In April, they capture the Black Sea port of Trebizond. Meanwhile, the British transport 2 motorboats to Lake Tanganyika in Africa. They finally arrive, after a 10,000-mile trip by sea and land, and help the British seize control of the strategic lake from local German forces. Music. Same month in German Cameroon, German troops besieged on Mora Mountain for 18 months finally surrender to the Allies. It marks the end of the Cameroon campaign. Music. On the Western Front, the Germans unleash a devastating assault on the French fortress town of Verdun. German General Erich von Falkenhayn knows France will defend the symbolic town to the last man. His plan, in his own words, is to bleed Franz white in its defense. It is the strategy of attrition. Verdun becomes one of the most terrifying battles of the war, a mincing machine where infantry divisions are destroyed almost as fast as they can be fed into the lane. In Britain, 1 million men have already volunteered for military service, but the government realizes it won't be enough. Britain becomes the last major power to introduce conscription that spring. On the Western Front, British troops are the last to be issued with steel helmets. The nature of trench warfare produces a high proportion of head wounds. The German-style helm, the French Adrian helmet, and the British Mark I steel helmet offer limited protection from shell splinters and shrapnel. Neutral Portugal has been cooperating with the British, which seems to offer the best chance of holding on to her African colony, Portuguese Angola. On the 9th of March, Germany retaliates by declaring war on Portugal's Stone Front. Russia launches an attack near Lake Nero to relieve pressure on the French at Verdun, but it's a disaster. There are 100,000 Russian casualties, and the attack fails to divert any German troops from the fighting at Verdun. In Dublin, Irish Republicans launch an armed revolt against British rule. It becomes known as the Easter Rising, and is put down after 6 days of street fighting. In the Middle East, after a 5-month siege, British forces at Kut surrender. General Townsend leads 9,000 British and Indian soldiers into captivity. About half later die from starvation or disease. Britain wants Arab support in its fight against the Ottoman Empire, so it's promised Arab leaders an independent Arab state after the war. But now Britain and France secretly signed the Sykes-Picot Agreement, planning after the war to divide the Middle East into British and French zones of control. Unaware of this deal, Hussein bin Ali Sharif of Mecca leads the Arabs in revolt against Turkish Ottoman rule. In the Battle of Mecca, his forces seize control of the Holy City. On the Italian front, Austro-Hungarian forces launch a surprise attack at Asiago. Italian defenses give way. Austro Hungarian troops are poised to break through into northern Italy. That month in the North Sea, the German High Seas Fleet clashes with the British Grand Fleet at the Battle of Jutland. In the only major naval battle of the war, the British suffer heavier losses than claim victory, as the German fleet withdraws and does not re-emerge from its base for the rest of the war. Music. For the summer of 1916, the Allies have planned major simultaneous offensives against the Central Powers from east and west. Now they are needed more than ever to relieve pressure on the French at Verdun and the Italians at Asiago. The Russians launched their attack first on the Eastern Front. General Alexei Brusilov has carefully maintained the element of surprise. His troops break through the enemy lines in some places, advancing 60 miles and taking 200,000 prisoners. This brilliant, though costly Russian attack achieves its aim, as the Central Powers are forced to redeploy troops from other fronts to shore up the line at sea. British cruiser HMS Hampshire en route to Russia hits a mine and sinks off Orkney. Among the 650 dead is Britain's iconic Secretary of State for War Lord Kitchener. 3 days later, in the Adriatic, Italian troop ship Principe Umberto is sunk by a German submarine. It's the deadliest sinking of the war, with 1,900 lives lost on the Western Front. Britain and France launched their major summer offensive. The Battle of the Somme. Hopes are high for a breakthrough, but the first day is a disaster. A long Allied artillery bombardment fails to knock out German defenses, and waves of British infantry are cut down by machine gun fire as they advance into no man's land. In the space of a few hours, the British suffer 57,000 casualties, a third of them killed. It's the worst day in the history of the British Army, but more attacks are ordered, and the battle will rage for another 5 months. Music. Yet encouraged by the Russian advance, Romania joins the Allies, but despite an initially successful advance into Transylvania, Romania quickly faces a counteroffensive from German, Bulgarian, and Austro-Hungarian forces. The Allied force at Salonika tries to support Romania by launching their own offensive towards Monastery, with Serbian troops in the lead. There are small gains, but dogged Bulgarian resistance prevents a breakthrough on the Western Front. General von Falkenhayn finally calls off the attack at Verdun. The French army has honored their commander General Nivelle's promise. Illness they shall not pass, but victory comes at a terrible price. 365,000 casualties. The Germans lose almost as many. Verdun remains one of the bloodiest battles in human history. For his defeat at Verdun, Falkenhayn is sacked, and Germany's heroes of the Eastern Front von Hindenburg and Ludendorff take command in the west. Meanwhile, the Battle of the Somme continues near the village of Flers. The British introduced a new weapon they hope can break the deadlock of the trenches. It is called the tank, but despite some small successes, the first tanks are too few in number and too prone to mechanical failure to make any real impact on the Eastern Front. Russia's Brusilov offensive comes to an end. Casualty estimates vary wildly, but it's clear both sides have suffered catastrophic losses. Neither the Russian nor the Austro-Hungarian army ever fully recovers. Italian front heavy fighting rages throughout the autumn, as Italian forces make repeated costly assaults against Austro-Hungarian positions along the Isonzo River. The Battle of the Somme comes to an end amid autumn rain and mud. The Allies have advanced 10 miles at the cost of 600,000 casualties. German losses are about 450,000. The Allies reassure themselves that this is a winning strategy, because at this rate Germany will run out of men first, while disaster engulfs Romania as the country is overrun by the Central Powers. Romanian forces suffer 250,000 casualties. The remnants of its army take position alongside the Russians on the Eastern Front that winter. Franz Joseph, Emperor of Austria since 1848, dies. He is succeeded by his son Karl, and Britain Prime Minister Herbert Asquith with his force from office, and succeeded by David Lloyd George, while General Jaffre is replaced as French Commander-in-Chief by General Nivelle, who promises victory through bold aggressive action amid the comings and goings. As President Woodrow Wilson's attempts to mediate a peace settlement come to nothing, neither side is willing to make concessions. Epic History TV relies on the support of fellow history lovers. So, if you like what we do, please consider pledging. anything from $1 per video at the channel's Patreon page.